Alright, alright, guys and gals, Metal Man 8713 here today, and I'm very, very excited today because it is Only Fools and Horses Day. I'm joking. It's not Only Fools and Horses Day. I'm joking. If it was, I think it would have to be. I think I would have said so myself. Anyway, hello, guys and girls. How's everybody doing? It's Metal Man 8713 here today, and I'm here to bring you a brand new video today. This is going to be. I'm uploading this. I'm also going to upload some new videos in concurrently with my anniversary videos as well. So I did a video last night of what I said, what videos, new videos you could expect from me, and one of them is a discussion video, talk about video. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about a particular music act which everybody relates to, and also especially in this at this time of year. And also some because you're for people who don't really listen to the rest of this band's catalogue. They only remember them for their for their Christmas song, and also fans of the band also really listen to their other material as well. Apart from that, anyway, the band which I'm going to be doing today is a rock band today, and I'm here to talk about Slade. Yep, that's right. I'm here to talk about Slade today. The history, some history, the history of the band, some facts, what happened, and basically everything. The history of Slade. Let's get started. But before we start the actual story of the band itself, we are going to talk briefly. I'm going to tell you a bit of brief information about where they grew up and where they were born. So here we go. Jim Lee and Don Powell, two of the members, were born and grew up in Wolverhampton, and Noddy Holder in Walsall, which those two places are in the Black Country area, in the English Midlands area. And also, meanwhile, Dave Hill, the guitarist of the band, was actually born down in Devon, and then he later moved up to Wolverhampton when he was about when he was a young boy. So anyway, that's the brief information on that. We are actually gonna jump forward to 1964 because that is where the story starts. In 1964, two of the band's members, Don Powell and drummer Don Powell and guitarist Dave Lee, were both part of a group in the Midlands called the Vendors, and there were regulars on the club circuit down in that area. And also they also recorded 4 songs, which were they also recorded a privately pressed 4-track extended play as well. And so meanwhile, Noddy Holder was guitarist and vocalist in another Midlands-based group called Steve Brett and the Mavericks, and they released 3 singles in 1965 as well. So anyway, the Vendors, meanwhile, after listening to blues artists from America such as Sonny Boy Williamson II, John Lee Hooker, and Howlin' Wolf, they changed their name to the In-Betweens. their name before Slade, and they got very, very fabulous recognition as the band, and they supported fabulous 60s artists such as there was the Hollies, the Yardbirds. I'll say again, the Hollies, the Yardbirds, Georgie Fame, and Spencer Davis, among others. Those are just some of the names which I mention, and also in 1965, the Mavericks and the In-Betweens, they were on their way to separate shows, gigs in Germany, and both these bands met on a ferry, and that is also where Don Powell and Dave Hill and Noddy Holder met for the first time, and on that first time they asked him if he would be interested in joining the In-Betweens, but on that first occasion Noddy declined for the first on that occasion, and then afterwards when they got back home in Wolverhampton they met again, and then he was like, oh, and then he was like, oh, okay, I'll join the band. Yep. He joined on that occasion, and then afterwards to complete the picture of the famous lineup, they got in multi-instrumentalist Jim Lee. He had a very big, strong musical background, very excellent bass guitarist, and also he played piano and guitar. And also, did you know? And also, he got first class honours in your London Music School practical exam. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll say that achievement for Jim Lee. Well, yeah, an early achievement for him, I would say. And meanwhile, in 1966, the famous four of Slade were all together, and a party. I'm joking. Not yet. I'm joking. Not just yet. We're still in 1966. Yep. This new version of the In-Betweens, they recorded two songs. A cover of a song by a man called Otis Redding. It was called Security, and also they had a self-penned song called Evil Witchman. It was released on a label called Highland Records, and then later on in the year, in about probably at the end of the year, 50 years ago, actually, there's one thing which I need to tell you about their first gig. I'll put it this way, how Noddy Holder put it. Yep, he said the first gig was Walsall Town Hall, April the 1st, 1966, April Fool's Day, and then they were playing the Fool from then on. Anyway, flash forward to December of that year. In December 1966, they recorded and released a new single called You Better Run, and it was on Columbia Records. A couple of the band members also recorded as well, and also Don Powell recalled that the record number was DB8080, it reached number one on the not nationally but on the Midlands charts, and it was number one in the Midlands for 6 weeks, and it kept Tom Jones and the green grass of home off for 6 weeks. and also Dave Hill also recalled one occasion where they tried to get their local music shop to stock 500 copies of the single to try to get it in the charts, but that didn't work. And then afterwards, after a couple of years building up, you're building up the in 1969. And also they recorded one of the track called Delighted to See You in 1967 as well. So yeah, but anyway, it was a more psychedelic track, but it wasn't released for 27 years. But then it ended up on a psychedelic compilation album which came out at the time. Anyway, and well now, go forward to 1969. There was a local promoter called Roger Allen who he spotted the group performing, and then they recommended him to the AR head department at Philip Records, who's called Jack Baverstock, and that is where my friends and folks, they recorded their debut album. They recorded their debut album called Beginnings, and also they changed their name as well. They changed their name from the In-Betweens and before they were called Slade, for a while, they were, in 1969, they were called Ambrose Slade. And then after, they didn't really want to do it at first, but then afterwards they did it anyway afterwards. But then afterwards, later on, near the end of the sessions after that, this was a real turning point for the band, which was the arrival of Newcastle, of Newcastle musician and music manager at the time, Chandler. He was the bass player in the Animals on their first few albums in 63 to 66 period, and also he was the manager of Jimi Hendrix for 2 years, because he spotted Hendrix playing in obscurity in America, and then afterwards he plucked him out of it and also brought him to Britain to record a couple of his first 2 albums in London, Fabulous, which were fabulous, really successful, and also later on he wanted to get more creative on his third album, and Chaz didn't really like the idea that much, so he fired Chandler, and then he wanted to take the creative direction of his album like one step ahead, I would say, and then they got Electric Ladyland out of it. And Chaz Chandler, I'll say once again, he had previous managerial experience because he managed Jimi Hendrix experience, and then he agreed to manage them in 1969, and he was the manager of the band for 12 years, and he was the main and he was like, you're the main mastermind at the time behind their success. And then afterwards, and also at that time, they changed the name. Yep, Ambrose was out, and then from now on, they were called Slade. Yep. Yep, and then also there was you'll get the band's profile up a bit. Also, I've got a funny story to tell you about before. There was this. Look what Chaz was trying to find for the band, and he found it. It was the Skinhead look, and he was like, Chaz, yippee! And then he went, and he was on the phone right away. He was on the phone right away to the and then yep, Don Powell said, oh, he wanted us to become skinheads. He said, oh no way, I've spent 3 years growing me on head, no way. And then since he spoke since he's from Newcastle, he spoke to him. When he tried to get Dave Hill to try to adopt the look, he was like, hey Davey. I mean, because he speaks in a Geordie accent, and as Noddy Holder put it, all you got to say to Dave, you have to go like, Davey, you used to be a millionaire if you have this done. But then afterwards, and it was a friend of Chaz who recommended the look to the band, but then afterwards I was like, oh no, what have I done? And then he said, and I was like, oh, too late, they said. Well, they're having their head shaved and they're getting the boots and braces together. Yep, and also they adopted the look for a couple of years actually, and also off their first album, Beginnings, they had a few singles released. There was an Beginnings, I'll quickly tell you about it. It wasn't really that much of a success, but I'll tell you, it did start to help Foot Slade, in the direction where they were going. at the time. So yep, and then they released the instrumental called Genesis, and then which one did they release again? And also they also released a single called Wild Winds Are Blowing. Yep, and also they had a cover of a Beatles song called Martha My Dear, and that album had quite a few cover songs on it, I'll just say. Well, anyway, and also the Skinhead look. They tried to I think it was Chaz's idea. It was Chaz's idea for the band to try to get a bit of publicity out of it, but it also had a bit of it also had some sort of a not so good, like, relation to football hooliganism as well. But I could say when the members were talking about the look, he said Jim and Dave were sort of like the awkward members with the look, and because meanwhile Noddy Holder and Don Powell at the time, they were already like tough individuals at the time already, and and also before a gig, before a show, there was one occasion where they had to play where they just played cards in the dressing room, stayed in there, and because otherwise if they went out the front it would have been like it would have been like that. And also there was also this one other place where they played in Bournemouth, and it was full, and the place was full. And the place was, Don Powell said, full of skinheads in there. Yeah, and there was when I mentioned Martha My Dear, I saw a video of it, and Jim Lee had the electric violin. That on there, they could have saw right through them. Well, but anyway, enough about that. Anyway, moving on to 1970, they released a new album in 1970 called Play It Loud, and that marked a sort of change in their style, actually, to from a and it was quite a heavy album, actually, and it was quite a sort of a influence on quite a few your rock music genres as well. I'll name one of them, punk rock, for instance. And also they released a single at the time called Shape of Things, and also Shape of Things to Come, and also they had a few appearances on Top of the Pops as well, but didn't really chart. And then afterwards, later on in 1970, they signed to Polydor Records, which was one of their famous record labels at the time, and their instrumental, and the instrumental, which I mentioned, called Genesis, from the band's first album, they added lyrics to it, and then afterwards they changed it to Know Who You Are, but it failed to chart. And also, did you know? And also, Play It Loud. It was produced by Chaz himself as well. Because Chaz up until the late 70s, he produced all the band's material at the time. Singles, albums, compilations, live albums, you name it. And then later on in 1971, this is where the success all first started. They released a cover of the Bobby Crotcher. I can't pronounce his last name. It was the song by him called Get Down and Get With It. Get Down and Get With It, and that was their first successful single. It reached the top 20 in the UK charts at the time. It made number 16 in the charts at the time, and that was the first step of the ladder, I could say, to their success. And also, since glam rock came about at the time, and also I'll mention Slade did quite a number of different rock styles, which had quite an influence on a various palette of diverse artists. There was glam metal, grunge, alternative rock, heavy metal, punk rock. Quite a few genres which have been influenced by Slade. Anyway, 1971 they dropped the skinhead look, and then afterwards they picked up a glam rock look by growing their hair long and aligning themselves to the movement, and also one big part of of the Get Down and Get With It song was the audience participation on there. Yep. And also, as Dave Hill put it, the bother boots, he called them, from their skinhead era, developed into bigger boots, and also during this yeah. Well, anyway, then later on in 1971, Jim Lee and Noddy Holder formed a writing partnership which lasted. Right, I'll be back in a minute. I'll have to